everyone, I'm Dan Luepkes. Get one thing clear right away, I am not a professional speaker. So if I bore you, you go to sleep or go out the back, you won't offend me whatsoever. But I'll try to get through this, and I think I got some information that maybe can help you. I normally can see the screens a little bit better, and I'm just going to have to do it off the computer here, so it might be a little odd, and I'll have to wear my glasses. But anyway, a little about myself. We got me and my son farm a couple thousand acres in northern Illinois. We've got 100 cow-calf operation. Some of the reason we got a little bit of notoriety, I guess you would say, is we've had a first place in the Illinois NCGA for, it'll be, I think if we do it this year, which they're coming out tomorrow, will be 9 years running straight with a first place. So I guess with that, it's just I've been able to be fairly consistent with a program and get, pretty good yields and found some things that have worked for me. So I'm going to try to share some of those things. Setting the stage on a high management corn grower, there's just a lot of different things, that are involved with that. And a lot of it's, season long, different nitrogen and applications of micronutrients at different times. And there's many things that, these other guys have already went through on that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But the challenges, or my challenges, are maximizing yield potential by soil type, by the weather, the field topography, fertility management practices, and the constant changing of variables. And with that, as I have a saying that's I've kind of coined, I guess, is my plan is for my plan to change. Because with soils, Mother Nature, yield, components, tissue sampling, and all the different tools and the things we use, is what you originally planned isn't necessarily what you're going to do through the rest of the year, because something has changed that plan for you. And that's just, we all know that as farmers. I mean, we have that, we know what we're going to go out there and do. And then something gets thrown in our face and we have to change our plan. So that's why I say my plan is for my plan to change. I expect that to happen pretty much every year. When you're understanding your soils, which is one of the main components of high yield and just being a farmer, is the different components that I feel are crucial to high yield and management. One is what I've seen some of the guys talk about. We're very basic, your pH, a season-long nitrogen program, P and K soil levels, a sulfur program, which I'm going to touch on more in this presentation. I think some people are missing the importance and are maybe not aggressive enough in their sulfur program, and we'll get to that. Calcium magnesium ratios, very critical to me anyway. There's also, and with all this, then you have your micronutrients, and then what this soil conference is all about is biology, right? Which has become more and more crucial in understanding high yield and getting to the result that you want to benefit from. This slide is just showing the different fertilizers and the salt index. I'm sure a lot of you have seen these slides, but that's something you have to be knowledgeable on, or at least take a look at, because if you're using certain fertilizers that are extremely high in salts, you got to figure out either how to change that or buffer them, or maybe use not as much of them. And if you look on there, potassium chloride is one of the highest ones. So, but we use a lot of UAN. UAN's fairly high too, but we've learned how to buffer that. So there's things in there that you want to look at. While we're on this slide, if you look at potassium sulfate, it's at a 42 where potassium chloride's at a 120. So sometimes that's a good source if you have a problem with salts. One of the things we're talking about, pH, right? So effects of pH on fertilizer efficiency. So you know how they were saying, get to a 7. Well, theoretically, a 7 pH gets 100% of your fertilizer efficiency. But the problem with that is if you're at a 7, plenty of your micronutrients are not quite as available as they would be at a lower pH. So I feel 6 to 6.5 is where I want to land instead of closer to the 7. In lower pH soils, heavy metals seem to take up more of the exchange sites, like aluminum, which we don't want that, right? So if you get your pHs in line, more of your cations and ions and all those, can line up and hopefully get up into your plant more efficiency with your different nutrients. This chart kind of shows a little bit of that, where if you look right where nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, and magnesium are somewhat in line on the green, move over to the micronutrients, you got to back down that pH scale to get them more at their sweet spot, which is really a lot of them are in that 6 area. So, and as we're learning, these micronutrients seem to be making the difference in a lot of different things. You've all seen a periodic table just showing basically all these elements in the earth, and we're trying to negotiate all these into a plan and do it right, and it becomes so confusing which comes into this mineral interactions. I mean, look at the mineral interactions that you can lose yourself in this. I mean, if you study this too much, you'll go mad almost. There's a lot going on there, and you can actually hurt yourself with the wrong things at the wrong time, and that's where this comes into. The antagonism chart, look at that versus the synergy. There's all kinds of antagonisms. This chart's like my life, I think. I have a lot of this going on. But the synergy is there's just certain nutrients that work very well together, and there's a lot of them that don't. So you have to work around that. You can't get one thing out of whack too much than the other, and I've done that, trying to find that missing piece and then get that one up, but then we drove another one down on a nutrient. So it's tricky. It's a teeter-totter. This is basically just showing, exchange sites that, high CEC soils have more exchange sites than lower CEC soils. I don't think I even have a slide in here on CECs, but this is a question to the crowd. How many people out here believe you can change the CEC of your soil? Raise your hands. Okay, I don't have many hands raised, but you can. CECs are a mathematical equation. They just have certain components of nutrients, and that's how you come up with a CEC. So by changing your calcium or your magnesium, your potash, or these different things, you can change the actual CEC of your soil, and I have done that. Which leads us into kind of soil tests, right? The importance of comprehensive soil tests. What do I look for and in what order? The first thing I'll go to is a base saturation. That's the first thing I'll go to. Usually calcium and magnesium. For us, that's very important in our area. Everything is out of whack in our area. They can be fixed, and we have fixed them, but most people don't because they don't understand this calcium, magnesium. The next thing I go to, is your pHs, organic matter, CEC levels, and of course your phosphorus and potassium, and the micronutrients. They're all important. Every one of them is important, but you have to start with certain things. And for me, I'm going to start with my calcium-magnesium ratios. Because if that's off, the rest of it isn't really going to work. At least on my soils, it's not. Something you guys already seen some of this today, but different labs measure so differently. You have the Melick 3, the Olson, Braze, acid extraction versus water extraction. We've sent results away that do actually the same extraction, and you get different tests back on the exact same soil. It's very frustrating. And they showed that a little bit earlier. how much value can you put in that soil test? So they're a tool and we have to use them. I like to use them a little bit with tissue analysis to see if they coincide with each other. But you have to, for me, I think you find a lab that you're comfortable with and then you kind of stick with it. I think the Haney test and some of these other tests are ones that we need to, by we, I'm going to say me personally, use more of, because it's I don't know if it's a new way of thinking, but it's showing more of what's really available to the plants rather than what's just in your soil, right? So this makes me mad. If you guys can see that, and I think you can, this is a soil test that this is actually a neighbor, and this is what they hand them. There's no information on there. What can you do with that? It's got P1s, Ks, and pH, and their CCs. There's not near on there. You can't base anything off of just that. But that's what a lot of, and I hate to use the term co-ops or retailers, will just give that out. Because I think one of the reasons is they think farmers can only comprehend that. And the other reason is I think it's just cheaper to run it. So you've got to ask, you have to specifically ask, to make sure you're getting some of these other things in. This particular test, it's an A&L. This is not one of our tests. But it's, at least it's got the micronutrients and it's got the base saturations. At least it's got the basic components. But if you look at this, if you guys look like on the CC down about, I don't know, line 8, look at that. There's a CEC on there of 99.9. I've got no clue how to do anything with this soil of that. I've got nothing like that. But this guy has that challenge, and I'm sure you guys have different challenges like that too. Too high, too low. There's all these different things. And that's why it makes it so hard for someone to blanket recommendations. You can't just have a 200 pounds of DAP and 150 potash and whatever and go. You just can't do that. There's too much variability going on here. This is actually one of my soil tests here. And it'll show you stuff we have kind of corrected, but where we need to get better at. Now, my base saturations of calcium on here is 71.7. That's where I want to be. I want to be somewhere around 70, 72. The mag is 16.6. That's somewhere in the neighborhood I want to be also. Somewhere in that range works for us. There's still a little hydrogen in the soil, so we can put some nutrients out. My K base saturation there is 6.6. I feel that's pretty good. But if you look down, it'd be, the yellow bar near the bottom that's low, and that's manganese. For us, that is a problem. Our soils are low in it. I've seen soil tests from other parts of the country where they're not. I mean, they got enough. Their tissue samples show it. We have started being more aggressive with this micronutrient, and I think it's starting to show. We're dry spreading it at rates higher than what most people would feel is maybe even economical, but I'm trying to fix a problem. And we're bringing it up. We're not going to do it all in 1 year, but over 3 or 4 years, hopefully I can get that micronutrient a little bit higher. Zinc used to be low for us back when we were trying to pick the micronutrient we were going to pick on for that year. As you can see, we're pretty decent with that now. Iron, we're just naturally high in our soils. Copper is another one that we are working on. Basically non-existent in our soils. We've been spreading dry, trying to move it up a little bit also. So you can't do it all at once or it'll break you, but we started with our calcium, magnesium. It's where I want it to be. We have pretty good phosphorus and potassium levels. Calcium, we're getting there. I'd like to see it maybe a touch higher on some of my farms. This one, it's good, but on our higher organic farms, I'd like to take it up higher yet. This particular slide is when we spoke out in Nebraska a couple years ago, and a guy handed me this soil test, and he said, we're having trouble on this, but the levels seem pretty good, but we can't yield with it. He said, what do you see? Well, I started looking at it, and just like I was talking about, well, your K levels, you know, geez, you're 6%, it's pretty good. Mag, I don't know, what's that average, 15%? Calcium, 72, 74, just kind of like what I was talking about. That's all good. You know, I'd say that all looks good, but then you drop down to the next line. Sulfur's low, zinc, low, manganese, low. Iron, they're high, just kind of like we are. Copper's not in there. I don't know why they missed that one or if they weren't testing for it. Boron, very low. So I started asking them a few questions. I said, all right, I said, when was your ground broke out of, you know, broke into production? When did you settle this area? And, you know, they were back then, I think they said probably a lot of it in the 20s and the 30s in the area that we were in. And most of them had never addressed any micronutrients. I said, well, you had them at one time, but you've milked them all out of your soils. You know, you've used them. You've put the P back and the K back and, you know, these other components. You gave those all back to the soil because you know the crop needs that, right? I said you haven't gave it these other things. And there's a lot of cattle feeders in that audience. Anybody who's got cattle in here? Or livestock of any kind? Okay, well, if you're a livestock person, they're big cattle out there is the reason I said cattle. I said, so, you know, if you got a cow herd, right? Now, are you going to just give her, you know, corn and hay, which could be kind of like the phosphorus and the potassium, you know, or are you going to give her the other micronutrients that she needs? And, you know, as a cow person, they'll give those cows whatever they need, right? You know, and so if you look at a feed bag, it's full of all these micronutrients. And if an animal needs it, I guarantee you your crop needs it because they're both living organisms. Us as people, cattle, crops, they're not that far apart from each other. We all live and we all need these things. So back to that, I kind of just talked about, you know, those ratios, and that's just what that's saying. What I kind of already went over that. So if we hit those one by one, calcium, right? The importance of calcium: improves infiltration, increases space within the soil particles, moves nutrients and sugars from soil into plant, and feeds and stimulates microbes. Now, what I want to hit with a little bit on this calcium is, because we're in a soils conference, right? So if that calcium to mag, which I'm harping on, is off, and as they are in our area, unless you address it and fix it, you will not get proper water penetration or flocculation of the soil. Water will not go in easy enough. So I have a neighbor, and I actually do his custom harvest for him. I have no-till right next to him. I mean, we border each other. My soils won't wash in a heavy rain, but his do, and they're both no-till, and they've been no-till for a long time. The difference is we're getting water into the soil. And if you don't get that ratio right, or at least address it, if you have very high magnesium in your soils, like some of ours in our area are 30-35%, the water's going to have a hard time going in. So they're 80 years old. I just convinced them to start changing those ratios. They don't really understand it, but they're trusting me to try to fix it. And I don't want to keep harvesting through the ruts all the time. So anyway, causes of calcium deficiency, tying up with other things in the soil. Potassium, that can be a real problem with calcium. If you apply, I did this once, I applied too much potassium not in furrow, but on top of the soil in strips. We drove our calcium numbers right through the basement. It's that ratio. You gotta know all these things and watch for it. Importance of calcium in the plants, very important. Cell wall development, structure, stability, stalk strength, movement of nutrients within the plant is a big thing. When do you apply calcium? Well, I'm a big guy getting it in the soil. You know, I like adding it either through gypsum or high cal line or one of those other things. But you also can, you know, use some liquid products like calcium oxide or calcium nitrate. I actually use some calcium nitrate. The top two we've used a lot over the years to fix our soils, which is the calcitic lime and the calcium sulfate. Now, I think everybody's probably aware of this, but I'm going to go over it quickly just in case you're not. So we are in a dolomitic area on our line. So everybody for the last however many years they've been liming, 60 some years, probably 80, they use the same lime out of the quarry that's down the road. It's horrible. It's that bright yellow stuff that's full of magnesium. I mean, the magnesium levels in it are, I think they're like 18 or 19%. Well, we keep putting that on there. We just keep driving our mag levels higher, which creates this problem that I've talked about. So we go about 100 miles. It's not cheap, you know. We get the calcitic lime that's, I think the last we looked it was under 1% on the mag. And that's what we apply. So we do two things there. We move our calcium up, and we have not applied mag. The other great thing is gypsum. Now this is just math again. Our soils start here, like calcium and mag, just, you know, maybe 50% cal, 35% mag. A ton of gypsum within a year will knock that like that, because you've added quite a few pounds of calcium, and the sulfur in the gypsum attaches to the mag and washes that out of your soil. So you'll drop a percentage or two of mag. Do it again, and you knock it up here. You do that about 3 times, you can usually put your soil in a pretty good place. I know all soils are different, but that's what works in my area where we start with those ratios. It's not like it takes for 20 years and it's going to be forever till you get it done. It can be done. It just takes a little bit of action, you know, to get it done. This is actually a picture of gypsum, and we're putting it in a spreader that I'm actually mixing it there with litter. We also have to go 100 miles to get chicken litter, and I get what I can get. I can't get enough for everything, but we get what we can get. But it's a great thing if we can mix that litter, which has calcium in it too, and the gypsum, we can fix a farm with that over a couple years. It ain't, like I said, it's not overnight. Kind of just talked about these forms of mag, you know, dolomitic lime is what's high in mag. If you need, now there's areas of the country that need mag, you know, and I'm not one of them. So, you know, you got to almost reverse what I'm saying if you need magnesium. And if you do, K-mag is something, liquid magnesium, or dry spreading a dolomitic lime. You know, to me that's horrible. In calcitic areas, it might be a good thing to do. Now, but this slide is very important. If you don't take anything away today, I want you to really look at this. Okay, this came through NCGA data, okay? And it is calcium percent by yield level. Now, look at the green on, see the green is the 300 bushel level, right? And look at the calcium. See how the green pretty much tops that across there? You know, it's not 100%, but it's really close. The higher the calcium number, the higher the yield. And I've got a lot of friends in the high yield arena, I guess you would say. Their calcium numbers blow mine away. That's why I'm trying to get my calcium up. They have higher calcium numbers. Now, in contrast, this is just as important. Do you see the blue on the bottom? That's magnesium percent by yield level. Do you see what's leading that? That's the blue, which is the 160 bushel, which is telling you, and the high levels are lower, which is telling you the higher the magnesium in the plant, according to this data, is the lowest yield. The lowest magnesium is the highest yield. That's very important. And that's, to wrap your head around that, it's hard to move the needle on a lot of other things. Potassium, you know, everybody, we all talk about potassium. I don't think I want to spend a whole lot of time on that. We all know the importance of it, what it does. You know, earlier speakers were talking about application timing, maybe trying to get some of it out during the season. That's good. We struggle with potassium during fill, you know, grain fill. We drop off like a lot of guys do. We've tried a lot of different things. You know, I've used potassium chloride, but I've used quite a bit of potassium sulfate too to try to keep my salts down. I've used a little K-mag. Starter fertilizers we definitely utilize. Potassium acetate we use, but again, you know, it takes a lot of that to create the amount of pounds that you need. But that's more of a late season, well, it can do two things. A late season foliar feeder, or we have a little potassium acetate in our starter too, along with like a 624-6, and then we add some potassium acetate just to help get that seedling going a little bit earlier. This is agronomic stats on potassium, which is basically kind of like that slide I was just showing you. It's basically telling you the higher potassium levels, the higher the yield. You know, it's pretty much that basic. Sulfur. Now, I want to drill a little bit more on sulfur, kind of like calcium, okay? A lot of people do not put enough emphasis on sulfur. I think that's getting better now, but you know, we didn't used to have to. We had acid rain. You know, everything that they've taken away from us now is with, you know, our diesels, you know, they were high sulfur and they burn up into the atmosphere and it would rain down and it gave us sulfur and our crops used it. Okay, that was free sulfur. Do I think that was a terrible environmental thing? I really don't think so. I think it was just part of everything working. Now, we have to take all that sulfur out of our fuels. We all have to put DEF on our equipment. Costs us all tens of thousands of dollars to do that. Another thing that pisses me off. And now I got to buy sulfur to do what the acid rain did. That's just, but it's the way the world is, right? So we got to adapt. So, sulfur is the fourth major nutrient. It's a major nutrient, it's not a micronutrient. Role within the plant, synthesis of plant proteins and chlorophyll, and it also has a lot to do with, you know, uptake of nitrogen. Causes of sulfur deficiency, basically less sulfur being applied, and like I just said, less atmospheric sulfur. Sulfur is leachable, so you know, you can't have, it won't stick around forever. You can put a bunch out there, but it's a yearly thing. It's just like nitrogen. Soil test levels, you know, in that 20 to 25 parts per million or 40 pounds. Application timing, again, if you can, all season long. Now, this is something I don't think a lot of people understand, and maybe it's something worth looking into for you. So there's, like if you're dry spreading sulfur, there's elemental sulfur, and then there's sulfur bentonite. Now, sulfur bentonite is still basically elemental sulfur, but it's changed into basically a different form. The particle size is different, and they've added bentonite, which is kind of like it's a clay substance. And it changes the way the water infiltrates the product itself and degrades the sulfur. So if you see those dishes that are kind of on the right there, that's basically showing with sulfur bentonite that it doesn't take very long for water or soil moisture or rainfall to start degrading that to make it usable to the crop. The sulfur, on the other hand, takes a long, straight elemental, takes a long time. So we try to use in our program sulfur bentonite. It's been a couple times I haven't been able to get it, but we do have it sourced for this next year. It's a superior product. It really doesn't cost anymore. You need to look at that. Kind of how sulfur works. Sulfur oxidation increases the population of thiobacillus bacteria. So if you keep feeding sulfur out there, you will increase your thiobacillus bacteria population because it's food for them. And the more you get that out there, the more sulfur you're adding. And what I'm getting at is over a 2 or 3 year period, now you've got kind of the factory working, okay? It's just like with all this biology we keep talking about. It isn't instantaneous. It takes a few years to get things working, and it's no different with this. Manganese is what I was touching earlier, is one of our problems. Manganese is very important with soil health, microbial activity. Another reason I'm trying to get it elevated in our soils. For stress tolerance and photosynthesis and production of chlorophyll again. Causes of deficiency, what I say earlier, lack of application. You used it up. Crops have used it over the last 40 years. You know, once it's gone, it's gone. Application timing, again, you know, we're doing a lot dry spread now because to get our soils actually changed, it takes that amount to move the parts per million in our soil test per se. But you can Band-Aid, as we all do lots of times with starter, wide drop, foliar, you know, to try to get adequate amounts through the year. The different forms of manganese, you know, there can be a liquid form you can use as the Band-Aid, or manganese sulfate, which is what I'm dry spreading. Zinc is kind of the same thing. Basically application timing and all that the same. You know, you can use a liquid on your starters, which we do, or you can dry spread the zinc sulfate, which we also do, but we solubilize a lot of zinc sulfate and manganese sulfate. I got a tote, 250 gallon tote, and I got a propeller rigged up in it, one of those, you can buy those, I can't remember the name right now, Agitote, I think. And I got 250 gallon of water, I got 50-pound bags of a soluble manganese or zinc, and dump them in, a few minutes, she's agitated up, and then it goes into our hot load trailer and right out to wide drop. So we are wide dropping not only nitrogen and sulfur, but we're also giving it some Mn and some zinc, and along with some other things. Zinc uptake, I mean, I don't think we need to go there. Uptake charts through all this stuff, micronutrients, nitrogen, everything ramps up a lot, you know, when you start approaching 1,000 GDUs. Mainly, you know, like I said, most of the micronutrients and the macronutrients are that way. And that's mainly, I think, the size of the plant. Boron, very crucial. We use a lot of boron. Again, big for cell division, root growth, key to efficient K uptake. It also has to do with nitrogen uptake, which isn't on here. The sources we're using, actually, I don't use a lot of liquid boric acid. I do use a lot of dry soluble solubor, which I make just pretty much the same way what I just talked about, Mn and zinc. We brew it up ourselves, we inject it in a load, and away we go. Dry spreadable granulabor I've used a fair amount of. Granulabor does a really nice job if you're dry spreading in the spring, will hold boron levels throughout the year. Where solubor will leach away on you and get used up pretty fast. Granulabor is basically the same thing, but it's bigger crystals, and they're unevenly sized for a reason. So as moisture and rainfall comes, they break down in the soil, and there's kind of that always little bit of it breaking down all year. And I've done enough tissue analysis through the year to show that that does work. If we put out 10 to 15 pounds of granulabor in the spring, we can hold adequate boron levels through grain fill. It's the same thing, basically, the uptake chart. This is interesting. Okay, this one I want to spend just a little bit of time on. So I'm sure, we've done a lot of tissue sampling, but I'm sure you guys have heard of these new handheld leaf tech tissue analysis. They basically go right out in the field, put a leaf in it, it reads it, it sends it to the cloud pretty much immediately, goes through whatever algorithms and whatever they have to. Sometimes it takes a few minutes, sometimes it takes a little longer, but it gets shot back to you, usually fairly quick, usually 10 minutes, I would say lots of times. Unless they're getting overcrowded with it, it might take a little longer. But anyway, we've been using that and they're fairly accurate. Some of their micronutrients are a little off yet and they're addressing it, but it's first year and pretty heavy use. So they've got probably, I was gonna say thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of samples that they've done. So they're trying to dial it in. But when we were checking with our tissues, the macronutrients are pretty darn close. A couple of the micronutrients, they're a little off. Manganese is one of them. I think copper, they were off some, but they're trying to fix that. The point of this slide is if you see where it is in green where it says double ears. Okay, so what I did was I went out into a field and the top 6 or whatever it is just a plant with a single ear. And then I found plants with double ears. Now these plants weren't like by themselves or anything. It was just a plant that had a double ear. And I thought, well, it'd be kind of interesting to take the tissue samples between a plant with just one and a plant that had a double ear and see what those plants said. So if you look, the nitrogen, dead even, 4.13, okay? So apparently, you know, nitrogen wasn't the difference in the double ear there, right? Because we had the same nitrogen. But then you start going down the line. Our P's, we were higher, a third higher. Our K's, third-ish higher. Mag, remember what I said a little bit ago? The lower the mag, the higher the yield. Shows it right there. Calcium, they were about dead even. Sulfur, higher. Boron, over double. Zinc, double. Manganese, triple. Iron, 20 parts per million more. And copper, you know, 40 or 50% higher. What's that tell me? Micronutrients made the difference mostly there. That's what that tells me. Now that's where we're learning something. So paying attention to these micronutrients along with all the other stuff we're here to learn, you know, all the biology components and everything else. But lots of times biology gets you more of all these things, especially micronutrients. Understanding micronutrient demands. Well, I'm sure you've all been where they say, well, you know, when you go out at fungicide time, put a pint of boron in. Was that going to hurt anything? No. Is it going to do you any good? Probably not. Ain't enough. There's a tipping scale there to where you have to have enough that makes yield. Just a little bit. I like to put my boron in the ground if I can. And then if I see it on a tissue, I know it came up through the roots. It had to. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. If you spray it on a leaf, take the leaf, send the leaf in, it shows boron, well, sure, it's gonna. You just sprayed it on there. So I feel more confident in boron coming up through the roots. But what that basically is saying is, you know, for a decent corn crop, we really need a couple pounds of boron, actual boron. You know, we're talking actual now. So by putting a pint out, that ain't nothing. That ain't gonna get you there. Like I said, it ain't gonna hurt nothing. Didn't cost you that much, but is it gonna do you any good? Probably not. This is just like, actually we do it with that agitating. Now this is an old slide, but that's a pallet of boron, solubor, on top of a semi, and we'd have water rushing in there with agitation and just start opening 50-pound bags and dumping it in there. I mean, we'd put, you know, quite a bit in there. Solubor is a very easily product to solubilize. That's why they call it solubor. It doesn't take much for it. So it's an easy product to use. It's probably the most cost-efficient way to get boron into your plant. That's where you ain't got enough boron. I mean, that's severe, but that, we feel that was the limiting factor on those ears. Now, you know, we're in a soils class or convention here, so we'll talk a little bit about, you know, biology and soils as far as the importance of all this too. Now, these pictures are all in my field. Now, if you see a field at a certain time, but if I'm seeing mushrooms or molds or anything like that growing on the soil, I'm happy. You know, you got biological stuff going on there. I'm sure plenty of you have walked fields where it just looks dead in there. There ain't nothing, right? Well, that's what I want to see. Have I achieved that on all my soils? No, but I've achieved them on some, and I'm working towards that. And that's done, I mean, that's a wide component of things, right? I mean, that's cover crops, it's manures, it's some no-till incorporated into that, a lot of different components, humics used into that to make that biology basically explode, right? This is just a picture of my corn plants in a field, basically where the roots are coming out of the ground. Now, you know, when they were talking earlier about, you know, the roots just in a small area of the row. Well, I don't have that. My roots are all the way across. I mean, they're to the center of the row generally by knee-high corn or before. And I have all the mycorrhizae roots coming right up out to, even if there's stuff on top of the ground, if you did dry spread, if you can get those kind of roots, they're going to utilize that. If you're not getting those kind of roots, then you can't get all of that. But that's what I want to see. I want to see that kind of roots coming out of the ground. Because if you got that coming out of the ground, I guarantee you when you start digging around, you'll be very surprised. Just another picture, like when I'm out in the field, you know, if I see that, I take a snapshot of the molds. That's grabbing a handful of dirt, you know, and seeing it in there. It's just, that's the kind of stuff that trips my trigger. We'll talk about humics a little bit. Now, we use a fair amount of liquid humics. I've also used some dry. Everybody anymore has a humic product, right? I mean, it's like a buzzword, you know. But there's an extreme difference in humics, and I want you to do your own research on that. You know, when they talk about the percentage, or make sure you know the percentage, or press them a little farther to see how that percentage came up with by their company, okay? Because there's huge differences. And where your humics come from is a big deal. Okay, so we get ours out of Canada, and we believe it's a superior product. I'm going to tell you the easiest explanation. That humic comes from freshwater deposits where the humics out of like out west, the leonardites, these are not, what I'm talking about here is not a leonardite. The leonardite shales were saltwater deposits. They have higher heavy metals. They've got other things in them. Not that they're bad. I'm not going to say they're bad for your soil, because they're still good for your soil, but there's some bad coming along with it. So we like to use a cleaner product than that. And it's actually a more concentrated product. So this picture actually shows a mine, basically up in Canada. They extract it dry, and then they do two things with it. They either turn it into a liquid, or they I'm not, pelletize isn't the right word, but they make it into a dry spreadable form, and we've also used that too. The benefits of humics and humic acids are they stimulate biology, right? I mean, that's one of the biggest things. They increase soil organic matter, enhance root growth, enhance nutrient uptake, strengthen a plant, preventing disease. They're a catalyst for microbial activity, chelate the nutrients to improve uptake, and they actually help improve a CEC. That's just what you're going to get out of it today. What are you going to get out of it in the future if you keep using them year after year is helping improve soil structure, increasing your soil tilth, reduce compaction, breaking down residues, you know, if you've heard a lot of that about humics, and helping reduce soil erosion, and that again goes back to a better soil flocculation and getting water to go in. better. So humics are a big part of our program. We highly believe in them. Really hard to find any bad press on humics. I mean, you'd have to dig pretty deep, and I still don't think you would find it. Humics are well known, well documented that they're good for the soil. This is just a picture of, we had a wet year that we couldn't get back in, and one of our cover crops had rapeseed part of it, and it got out of control on me because it was wet and we couldn't get in. It was 2019 when everything was so wet. So I don't like to get my covers that out of control. I mean, those were going to seed, but it just kind of happens, as we all know with covers sometimes. They have all kinds of great benefits, but you got to manage them, right? This slide is occasionally, well, not occasionally, every year I will chop some rye, sometimes more than less. But this is a rye crop that was a cover crop, but I fertilized it in the spring with nitrogen to get it to grow bigger because I knew I was going to chop it, right? So that stuff there, I mean, it's 6 foot, all 6 foot. And we did it right around the 1st of June, chopped it, made a tremendous amount of forage out of it. We went back in, and on that particular time, we put beans in. So one of the other things, cover crops, there's all kinds of different avenues. You're killing them, leaving them, rolling them, sometimes harvestability. If you do have cows, that's just for me. I'm a cow guy. We do that with for our cow herd sometimes. This slide's kind of important because, again, we're talking about soils. So I bought a farm. It's where I live now. I mean, I don't know. Been there. Bought it 30 years ago, probably. Very sandy, very poor. It was one of those farms on the market a long time. Nobody really wanted it. Price wasn't very high, but nobody wanted it because it's all sand. So I ended up, really didn't have much ground, like a lot of guys, starting with nothing, and I could kind of afford that, or thought I could, so I bought that, and competition around, you take what you can get. Well, I started a fairly aggressive program with cover crops on that. That's had a cover every year since then. A fair amount of manure, but mostly, I've done this many, many times in this farm, and I haven't really, I don't know how well this will play with this group, but I've let the rye get, just below waist, and we'll till it in with a high-speed disc. So we have all that green manure. I know tillage sometimes is a bad word when you're in a soils conference like this, or no-till, but we do a little bit of everything. We love no-till, but on certain fields, if we think we can make the soil better by doing this, we will. I've done that multiple times. Between that and the manures, we have gained 1.5%. We went from 2% organic matter to 3.5% over 20 to 30 year period. Can you do it overnight? No. But that's a huge difference. And you see that soil layer? That top layer is what we've done. The soil underneath is what we used to have. That's astounding. And the reason I'm seeing that's where a pivot got. I put water on this farm too, so we can grow really good crops on it now. That's where a pivot wheel got stuck and it cut a trench through there. So I just went down in and snapped a picture. It's just, the cow-calf thing, when we're talking about the whole use of biology and everything else. I love that too with the animals. We use, we're using stalks and feeding and, spreading the manure back out. And, we can't do it on all our acres. I don't have that many cows, but I can do it on a portion, and I really enjoy that. Then we have some hay, and we utilize our waterways. We bale all our waterways. I got a saying, I say, turn the trash into cash. Any of the junk feed per se, waterway grass, hell, I've got an old John Deere 16A green chopper. I'll go down the roadsides in the summer and chop that up and feed to the cows. They love it. So anyway, whenever you can utilize something like that, you can bring your ROI up. Factors to maximize crop potential. Well, that we all kind of know these, but hybrid selection, build a healthy factory, timely water, which is, I don't know how many irrigation. Well, for the heck of it, who's got irrigation in here? Very little, very little. And in my area, there isn't a whole lot of it either. Irrigation on sand is a great thing. I mean, you can grow some awesome crops. Providing, the adequate nutrients, which we've kind of went through, and minimizing, disease and insect pressure, which is also very crucial to high yields. This is just, there's all kinds of different ways, and everybody, and I don't want to say anybody's doing it better than worse. You have your people doing full tillage with deep rippers. This is a high-speed disc. This is strip till, which we've done a little of that. I love strip till, but I haven't totally committed to it yet, but I really think it's awesome. And then you have your best tillage tool ever made right there, right? God incorporated this into your soils to use. And in a complete no-till system, which we have some of that on some of our farms, you can tell that that's working over time. Another one of the things that is crucial for us in a high yield scenario is starter fertilizer. We do in furrow and we do side by side, alongside the road. In furrow, we're using like a 624/6. I'll go to this next slide. We're on our 3x3, but we're using a nitrogen, sulfur, and humic. We like to put quite a bit of humic in our nitrogen, again, to soften those salts. And I want to give you it's kind of a testimonial, I guess you will. My son, how farmers, you're always cutting your hands, right? You always got a blister, you got to cut. Whenever you get fertilizer, right, it burns like hell, right? Well, if we have this humic in, and we put a decent load of it in, you can have that fertilizer on your hands and it won't hardly burn. I mean, my son was the first to point that out to me, and he's right. You don't feel the salt. Again, we're kind of like the plants, right? They're not going to feel that salt either, so I feel that's very important to buffer those salts. We used to put our 3x3 in the ground with like a precision conceal system, and before that I had some Yetter systems. Those are all ground engaging. I got tired of wearing some of that out, and now we're going, this is not, don't pay attention to this slide yet. Now we're going out the back with our nitrogen and sulfur. This is Precision Planning's Furrow Force. I do not have this on my new planter, but I had it on this planter, and that is still the best no-till closure that I have ever seen or used, and I've used quite a few of them. Like I said, I don't even have it right now, mainly because of just the cost, and I went to a bigger planter and I found something that worked in all of my different soils and soil types and management practices. So for no-till, that thing works great. In tilled ground, sometimes not as great. Okay, we used to pull a tank when it's putting a lot of nitrogen on with the planter, and I still like that. Now we're doing saddle tanks, and I got the Yield 360 saddle tanks, and we go out the back. I'm not putting quite as much nitrogen on with the planter, more about logistics and just getting things done. This is a picture of my planter trailer per se. The front 15, those are 100-gallon tanks, I think. The front one, our starters are in. We have it blended, and we pump it in there. The next 3 yellow tanks are for that nitrogen, sulfur, humic, and whatever else, calcium nitrate possibly, it will be in that, in those. I've got 2 separate pumps, 2 separate reels. That way you don't cross-contaminate. And that thing's worked out very well. It's fairly simple, it ain't rocket science. This is what I like to see. Now this is in my field. You have, this is where you can tell just where one thing is taken away. On the left is just in furrow, and on the right is in furrow and with the 3x3. So you can see there is a definite difference there, right? And a lot of you guys have seen those kind of results. This is just out in basically the lawn in front of the shop where we dropped in and was just testing it, right? So you can see where we're delivering the nutrients right there. Now, where do you want your corn to live at in there? You want to live in that, you want it to live right in that green strip, right? Well, that's kind of our view on trying to deliver nutrients. These are a couple more slides on with and without. You can see there's just so many rows that had neither the in-furrow or the 3x3. Quite a difference. And the slide on the right, same thing. Quite a difference. We don't really go through that ugly stage, as a lot of people talk about with your corn, or if you're using a cover crop with rye, with the antagonisms, you might go through that ugly stage. If you can get a little more nitrogen on with your planter, you can alleviate that by a lot. This next slide, that's just, we love to see these tillers going off. If you fed a corn, really fed your corn, this is almost maybe luxury feeding, but you're going to get that. You know that plant is happy. And we see that a lot in our fields with a starter in our 3x3 system. Just another slide with and without. It's fairly telling. Focusing on the perfect stand, we've all heard that 100,000 times, right? You all went to the planter clinics. It's important, right? But, you know, it's one component of all this. Just getting a good stand. This is a slide actually of just coming through a terminated cover crop. And do you see how close they are in that one? That's when I was really I'm experimenting, trying to push populations. For me, that in 30-inch rows, that hasn't worked. As we've moved up into we got into the lower 40s, I lost yield. I either needed more groceries or, for me, it's really more about, we fed it a lot. It's really more about sunlight, I believe. I like it to look just like that picture right there. And then at harvest or close to harvest, all your ears, you can kind of see by that barbed wire fence, kind of like them all, real uniform across there. Now, we were just talking about population, and this is one of the reasons I was talking about that. We've got several slides on that. This is a dryland farm, and we have different years and different data, but I'll show you a few of them here. This is in 2020. So from 30,000 to 37.5, there really wasn't hardly any yield difference. The one at 32.5 for some reason was a little less, but 30,000 was right up there with 37.5. Well, all we did there was cost us more in seed. That's all we did. So your best ROI was at 30,000. And this is decent farm. These are 280 bushel yields. So. We have a bean one there. That's kind of just shows that these are all low populations, and it wasn't a very high yielding area. But between 50 and 90, or even 60 and 90, we didn't change a lot either. And we've replicated that with beans a lot of times too. I'm kind of settling in that 90 to 100,000 on my beans after all these different trials and checking this stuff. But that's kind of where I'm settling. That same Winterton farm, that's that same data, but I think we have some more here. Here's one I want you to look at. So it'd be the second set down there, Winterton farm. This is a year later that we were really dry. So it is what you would expect, right? It's the 30,000 yielded the best, and of course it had the highest ROI. But you see, we started losing yield as we started stressing that crop more in a drier situation. But I could say that as by moisture, or I could say that by nutrient. You could use any column you want. If you don't have everything right and you start moving your populations up, you actually can lower your yield at a certain point, of course. Now, if you drop below that, it's that same year, but this is an irrigated farm. And this is that farm I was talking about. I showed you the slide where we added the organic matter. So at 34,000, we were at 300 bushel, 300.9. And then I just went up 2,000. I actually lost yield on that trial. Doesn't always do that, but on that year it did. And then there's another, I think it was probably another variety. it did the exact same thing. I lost yield by going up just 2,000. It just, I met that tipping scale on that particular variety on that farm. Okay, now we've got 2024 results. That same farm I was just talking about. Now there, we had plenty of rain this year. We irrigated less than we've had. And as you can see by that top one, and that particular variety, it liked it a little bit thicker. When we jump to the next farm, which would have been those ones we showed earlier, again, the higher pops were doing a little bit better. So it's year in, year out. You know, it ain't always the same. What I said earlier, sometimes your plans change a little. It's just how much water you're getting. Maybe if you're getting enough water, that's a reason to go out and put more nutrients out, because now you've got the potential. So it's all those things you got to keep in mind. Now this, I like to always show a couple screw-ups, because I do as many as anybody. I bought a seed firmer once, and I'm going to tell you what brand it was, because it pissed me off. I use that word a lot. It was Flow Right, and this was years ago, but their seed firmers drugged my seed. And I tried adjusting and doing everything it could. It was in a light, sandier soil, and they drug seed. So I basically cut them off, and I ran without the rest of the year. So, but you can screw up. You can do everything else right. You know, I had all my fertility right, I had everything else right, and then I had a mechanical issue that basically, I wouldn't say it ruined the field, but it sure as heck messed it up, right? This one's totally my fault. Can't blame this one on anybody except for me. I used too low of pH fertilizer, liquid, and sprayed it. No, I didn't spray it on the corn. I was actually running a kind of a modified Y drop thing, but it would splash up on the plant some. And occasionally when I got too much on a plant, I pretty much killed it. So you can, I hate to use that term, you F around, you find out. Well, that's what I did there. I was effing around too much. Nutrients, very crucial at V3, V4. You've heard that, I'm sure. You know, gaining the number of rows around. If you can keep that, remember those earlier slides I showed you where with the starter and without, and green corn versus yellow corn and bigger corn? Well, if that corn is happier at that stage, there's a better chance you're going to be 2 more rows around on that cob. Generally, if they, like a seed corn company will say, well, that hybrid does 16 to 18. Okay, well, you want to be in that 18, and you're going to have to do those kind of things to do that. This little sprayer here, I love this little thing. It's got no technology. I never have to wait on any of the cloud or anything. I just go out and spray and do the things I want to do. But this is mainly used for my testing. For like foliar, if we're foliar feeding, I put that little Y drop thing on that we were talking about just a minute ago where I screwed that corn up. I can do a lot of different things with this little thing. I don't have much money in it. I like to use it. I can do little strips like you need to do with plots. Cool, you know, I don't remember what I gave $10,000 for it, I think, and I've well gained that over the years just in information. So when you got something like that you can play around with, it's kind of cool. Now this is our big sprayer with our Y drops on it. Y drops for us are a crucial part of our corn program. We like to go in at about that high. We don't, you know, maybe waist high corn, a little bigger maybe sometimes. I don't like the corn to get too big. I want to get them nutrients out there where they got time. Y drop, you still got to get the stuff reined in, right? It's still got to get in the soil. So, you know, gives you time to get a rain, get the organism, start breaking the fertilizer down, get everything converted so the plant or the factory can take it up. So that's kind of the stage we like to do that. We like to use fairly high gallonages. I'll add water in. It does 2 things. For one, will help buffer salts, but it also gets my gallonages up. I can make a nice stream. I'm not skipping some plants. If you get lower gallons, it's just kind of trickling out and you skip some plants. So the trick for me with Y drops is a little higher gallonages. We always have humic in to buffer also, and adding some water just to get our rates up. That's just another picture of kind of showing when you're adding decent amounts of humic, you basically can trace that line because that stuff's black when it's coming out, and that's even after it's dried just a skosh. You know, you can see exactly where you went. That's just another growth stage one, just like the other ones. I do some weird stuff sometimes and makes people around me mad because it's work, but I never know till I try something new. So I decided I was going to try to solubilize this field grade AMS. So we got a fertilizer tender from our local retailer, backed it up to that bulk thing I have there, and then I've got a induction cone underneath there, and I just basically trickled it in and heavily agitated it, and I solubilized AMS. It worked. It's a pain in the butt, but it worked, and it was cheap. One of the biggest responses we ever got in beans was when we did that, and we added some potassium acetate and we wide dropped it in. Had a big response. So sometimes a lot of work pays off, but it ain't easy, and we all know farming ain't easy. Fungicide timing, I prefer brown silk, but anymore we're always going at VT or before. And if I prefer it, why am I going then? Rootworm beetles. For us, rootworm beetles, especially when you got a warmer year, they're coming in fast. And our populations are enough, we got to nail them. So we're going earlier. But what I'm doing with fungicide now is we're making our, you know, like the name brand ones that have the triple components, we're putting two different things together, and we're able to run a higher rate of like a Zoxy to keep that plant healthier longer than just us over-the-shelf fungicide would do. We're doing it with some generics that are fairly cheap, but we still have the 3 modes of action. So we are getting by for most part, most of the time, with one application with tar spot. It still comes in late, but generally we've been able to hold it far enough back that it's not yield inhibiting. Fertilizer applications late by the crop. We're finding that's a pretty big deal. This is, and they have a booth out here, NutriDrip. This is our drip system that we have on a couple hundred acres. It was very intense to put it in, but this will show my soils a little bit. On that particular farm, you can see how crappy it is. We have some top that's a darker, sandier loam, maybe 12 inches of it, but right under that, we go to silica sand. And you can see there it's a little yellowish. You go another 6-8 inches, it's pure white, it's table sugar looking, it's just that white. So we have no subsoils. So we are able with this system to deliver some nutrients a little later in the season. Nitrogen, boron, manganese, some of these different things. This is a pond I built for it, just to have the water sources available for this drip system. It's one of the valve components. This is inside the trailer where my sand media filters are, my control system, the VFD. We have a radio net in there that controls the zones. That's just a leak. Problem with the drip system, occasionally you get some leaks. That's that pond I just showed you when we're basically out of water, because I don't have quite enough capacity with a spring-fed creek to do all that I want to. We also have some pivots. Irrigation has become a big part of our high yield stuff on our sandy ground. On our dryland ground, we can do very well, but on our real sandy stuff, we are using quite a bit of irrigation. That just says start with the end in mind. Basically, you want a good crop, you know, so you got to think about all the components through the year. Just ears filled out, you know, I mean, that's micronutrients, boron, making sure everything is there, and getting it all out there. That's basically just harvesting, and a quick thing on harvesting at a certain moisture. I believe don't let that stuff get too dry. You lose yield. Try to get out there, you know, try to be picking hard when it's 25 is my view. We've done this several times, and how we've really seen it is NCGA entries. if we're in the same corn that we're in at 25, 26, and then come back in at 20, there's a substantial difference. So it's worth going a little bit earlier. And if you do everything right, you want to monitor, you can see some of that on there. So those plus 300 bushel yield. We do. That's all. That's basically it. Thank you for your time.